And welcome into another episode of Flyers Files on 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin Durso, the 97.3 ESPN Flyers insider, here with you, going solo today on this one. Haley Taylor-Simon will be back next week. And a lot to discuss with the Flyers, a lot of things that have been going on throughout the course of the last week. It really started with the game that was, no pun intended here, not to reference the quote from one Cutter Gauthier, but the game that was circled on everyone's calendar, that was last Saturday. And then bring it to the game on Thursday night against the New York Islanders, setting the stage for Saturday against the New Jersey Devils, a 12:30 start there. So a lot of things to kind of go over. But I think really we have to start with the Cutter Gauthier return and the atmosphere that was in that building on Saturday night last week. It was just as anticipated a game as you're going to find. The way the crowd was into it, the way the team fed off of that and really turned that into a memorable performance. And look, Anaheim's not the best team in the league by a long shot. They're one of the bottom feeders for a reason, and you saw that. But at the same time, that could have been a game. The Flyers had just played them 3 weeks earlier and really kind of had to gut out a win. It was a 3-1 win with an empty netter at the end that sealed the deal for them. So it wasn't a sure thing. And you got contributions from all over the place with this one. You see a guy like Jamie Drysdale score a goal. It was just his second goal of the season. Had some extra meaning because it came against his former team, Drysdale being the piece in that Cutter Gauthier trade. And similarly, to see Matvei Michkov get back on the board for the first time in a long time. A guy like Garnet Hathaway scores. Ryan Poehling scores. These are guys that don't contribute every night. Those bottom six players that you don't expect as much from. You get a guy like Michkov scoring. You get a guy like Travis Konechny having a 4-assist game. That really goes a long way. And, as I think about kind of that game, one of the things I came away from that game asking myself is, it's a 6-0 win. That's a big deal for Sam Ersson to get a shutout. It's a big deal for other guys to get on the board. And I kind of came away from that game wondering, is this going to be something that springboards the Flyers to more success in the near future? Is this going to kind of jumpstart a little bit of a hot streak for them because they had such a dominant performance and also managed their way through this thing, got to this game, this big anticipated game, won it in such a fashion. Now does that kind of unify them going forward, after really a month and a half of some struggles in certain areas? The way they had played in December, they had the potential finishing November to really kind of run with it. Then they didn't. And it kind of left them somewhere in the middle again. I mean, this was a team that as of last week was back into, a tie for last place in the Metropolitan Division, was approaching the bottom 5 of the NHL standings for a time. And it looked like maybe things wouldn't get better the way the goaltending had been, the way that everything else had gone. Sam Ersson's now on a bit of a hot streak. The rest of the team has been contributing and playing competitive games, kind of like they had all along without the goaltending. So now they have some of the goaltending element back. And collectively, that helps kind of see where this thing could go. So now that game, that atmosphere really kind of jump-started something, it appears, because they come back to finish the homestand on Monday night, and they play a team like the Florida Panthers. And, one of the things I would say the Flyers have not done a lot of this season that they did do last season was beat teams that were definitely a cut above them in the standings, that are a team that were in that next tier, maybe just very good teams. Maybe they are the elite teams, whatever the case may be. They really haven't beaten one of those teams this season. It felt that way maybe when they beat the New York Rangers in the Black Friday game, but really nothing that kind of compares. And you fall behind 2-0 in the first period against Florida, and it just feels like another here we go again situation. That, one, there was no carryover effect from Saturday. 2, another team that's better than you finding a way to beat you and make it look pretty easy, honestly, the way that first period had gone. And just another example of kind of how far away the Flyers are. And then things totally turned in the second period. They only get 1 goal in that period, but it was enough to kind of set the stage for the third, for where that thing could go. The teams trade power play goals back and forth. Flyers get the game tied. They give up a power play goal to Sam Reinhart that gives Florida the lead back. They get another power play goal, the game's tied. And then, a player who I have written down to talk about again that I feel like we've been talking about for a while at this point is Noah Cates. And he really kind of had one of those types of games on Monday, scoring twice, power play goal. He's been getting rewarded with power play time. He scores a key goal that ends up being the game winner in the later stages of the third. It really all comes back to, looking for guys who have that level of consistency. Noah Cates isn't going to be a player who ranks among the superstars per se, but he has the ability to be a very valuable piece to an NHL team. And the Flyers have seen that from him in his rookie year. They're seeing it again now. The totals are adding up for him again. He's really giving you everything you could want. He's doing the little things still that were still very much successful last season, but not to the level where it was leading to point production. Now he's getting some of the point production to go with it. His line mates have been key to this as well. Later on in the week, they played Columbus to start a 3-game road trip on Tuesday. Bobby Brink scored after going many games without a goal. So he finally gets the payoff. Cates is involved in that, obviously, by being on that line. You just see how kind of right now, it feels like the game is centering around Noah Cates. Like everything, he's so heavily involved in everything that's successful for the Flyers. And then, it seems like he's become the guy, the go-to guy as well, that their game plan is very much revolving around putting Noah Cates out there and that line out there in key situations. And you've seen it time and time again. You saw that in a closeout spot against the Islanders. He's on the ice to score the empty net goal, certainly with other players who he may not be playing with on a regular basis, but he's one of the guys they're going to put out there in that spot. And I think that's really important. And then, just the whole of that game, that Monday night game against Florida, to come back and win against a team like that, despite playing a really good second period, you're trailing 2-1 going to the third. And that's a team that was 16-0-0 going to the third period with a lead. And Florida really you had every reason to believe Florida was going to close another one out. And instead, what you got was the Flyers giving that comeback effort, finishing the job off, finding a way to win a game. They nearly find a way to win in Columbus. They end up getting a point out of a shootout loss. They win in against the Islanders as well. They're on a little bit of a run here. They've won 3 of their last 4 now. They've got points in 4 straight. That turns things around pretty quickly in an Eastern Conference that is struggling to find traction here. There's teams all over the map. There's a lot of things at stake and up for grabs in this conference, and you start to see how the Flyers putting together a couple of good results can lead to that. And I think that the game on Thursday is an interesting one as well, because of the fact that you're going to play a team. You play a team like the Islanders, and this is just the starting point of something. One of the things that we like about hockey, one of the things that we like, especially about playoff hockey, is that when you get locked into a playoff series, there's familiarity involved. You start to see the same players, the same teams over and over again. You battle it out in, 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, maybe if it goes the distance. And as you battle it out, it creates rivalries. It creates this animosity that doesn't have to be manufactured anyway, because it's just natural that you're going to find something to not like about the opposition over the course of that long of a series. That doesn't happen too often. You get home and homes on occasion, you get little things here and there, but it doesn't happen too often during the regular season. Maybe it was the intriguing thing about the COVID season that was after the shutdown in 2020, the 2021 season that was out there, where you played basically the same 7 teams over and over again. And that involved maybe playing the same team 3 times in a row, or twice in a row, or 4 times in the course of 2 weeks, or something like that. That was about as close as you got with regular season play. You just don't see it that much. And the Flyers schedule has been unique to me in that situation where, in December, maybe it was a couple of teams that you don't see as frequently. They played the Kings twice. They played, Columbus is in their division. They played them twice, but you get a team, Detroit's not in your division. You played them twice in short order. They played Toronto in a home and home. That doesn't happen too often, so you get this situation where now this month, there's a lot of familiarity being built. And it started with Thursday's game against the Islanders. And you take immediately a situation like what happened in the first period, where Ryan Poehling takes the hit from Maxim Siplikov, and that, now that creates a situation that won't be revisited next Friday when the 2 teams meet again, because Siplikov's going to be suspended for that game. He got a 3-game suspension as a result, but there was no penalty on the play. The Flyers basically spent the first period of that game looking for retaliation in some way. And then we're able to regroup, refocus, and kind of channel that into finding a way to win the game. And they did. But you're going to play the Islanders 2 more times over the course of the month. They're playing the New Jersey Devils on Saturday. That's the first of 3 meetings this month, and 3 meetings in a span of about 12 days. It's a lot of familiarity being built with these teams that you're going to see in pretty short order. So I look at those situations, I look at that unique scheduling, and I kind of wonder, what that can do for a team as well. The Flyers are getting the Devils, for example, a team that's ranked second in the division. They're getting them at a unique time for them because the Devils have not played well really since coming back from the holiday break. And they've won, you look at somebody, I was looking into Jacob Markstrom's numbers. He's not likely to get the start in that game, but just for, just to look ahead to try to project on a goalie for an afternoon game when there's not usually a whole lot out there. And Markstrom's won only 2 of his last 9 starts, and they've gone to overtime plenty, but he's only gotten wins twice in the last 9 starts. And then you start to see that the record backs that up, that they haven't fared too well. They get a lot of games to overtime, but they haven't fared too well lately. And that might be an opportunity for the Flyers, who have been playing better of late, to maybe take advantage, especially early on. So you never know how that's going to go. It's certainly a unique scheduling situation, and it puts them in a spot where maybe they find a way to build some points here. This is certainly, one of the things I was looking at also with the schedule is that with the Four Nations tournament coming up and the idea that that's going to create this break in the middle of the schedule, there's really not a lot of time to figure out whether or not you're going to truly be, and I'm not trying to say they're going to be buyers at the deadline, but what you're going to do about your deadline situation. A lot of teams are going to face this. You're going to go into that stretch, you're playing this home stretch of games right now, a lot of games on the schedule. They had, starting with the road trip, there was a 3-game road trip that's going to conclude on Saturday afternoon against the Devils. They're going to play 3 more games over the course of the next week, 3 more the following week. They go on the road really quick to play a couple of games that are more in the Western time zone, Colorado, Utah, back home for Washington, Pittsburgh, and the break hits, and that's it. Now, that sounds like a lot of games. That's still 13 games before you hit that break. But when you come out of the break, they only have 3 games left in February and then 3 games left until the trade deadline in March. So there's not a lot of time once you hit that break to kind of evaluate your situation. You better know kind of what you are at that point. And the Flyers are still kind of figuring that out, I feel like, because are the playoffs certainly still up for grabs? Absolutely. They're going to be up for grabs as long as that you mathematically have a shot and nobody in the Eastern Conference really runs away with it. But I also think that they need to recognize the position that they're in. Some of the games that they've lost over the last month, some of the games that they've won, maybe just barely. You want to build this thing to be stronger in the future. You want to build this thing for the long haul. And as much as you may have a few pieces in place that kind of symbolize that, you really need to figure out your future, and you don't need to mortgage the future over the possibility of one playoff run here. So just because they're in the race does not mean that you change your strategy any, unless you really just go on an absolute tear that really establishes yourself in the playoff race, maybe, then obviously I think you keep the group probably more or less together. And even though that may not be, that may be short-sighted of them, I feel like that's what they would do if they were more solidified in the playoff race. But I don't see that happening. They've got some tough games on the schedule. They're going to play teams that are more established playoff teams. You think even with this slide, the Devils are certainly in a much more secure position in the playoff picture. They play Washington over the course of the next month. That Washington's secure in that spot. The West Coast trip they're going to play, or the Western time zone trip that they have with the 2 games, they're going to play Colorado, who's definitely starting to solidify themselves in the race. Those are teams that you want to just measure yourself against, I think. I don't think you're worried as much about necessarily wins, losses, what this does for the standings. The players care, obviously, about that. But I think at the end of the day, you want to see this measure up to be kind of just a situation where, do you measure up with these teams? Can you compete with these teams? The Flyers have competed with a lot of teams over the course of the last month, even when they've lost games. You want to keep that going. You want that to be something that's solid. And I think that's what the rest of this season is about. Now that you're past the halfway point, now that you're into the second half of the season and you're approaching the next kind of big milestone marker, which would be the break and then the trade deadline, you just want to keep remaining competitive, and they've been able to do that. it wasn't long ago, even just as recently as last week, we were talking about the fact that after they had lost another game, they were on their, they had lost to Dallas. It was kind of a lifeless game, and they were 3 games below hockey 500. They were 17, 20, and 5. And you come back, you win 3 games over the course of a week. You have the other one go to overtime. You bring yourself back to hockey 500. And while that doesn't necessarily do anything for you in the playoff race and do anything for you in the standings, I do think it gives you something to feel good about and something to at least build on in terms of your performance and getting some results and finding out more about who you are going forward, because you need to get answers to a lot of questions. That's what we talked about on the show last week, was you need answers to a lot of questions. And now I think you're trying to find some of it. You're trying to continue to see how you stack up against the rest of the league. Sometimes it's not good, like it was against Dallas, but sometimes you go and you play a team like Florida, you get yourself finding some energy, you find an edge to your game, you find something that helps you build on what you've done and helps compound the effort into success, and you find a way to win a game, and you maybe do it again against a team like New Jersey, or you do it again against a team like Washington down the road, or something like that. So there's certainly things to consider as you move this forward. You want answers to your questions, but you also want to be mindful of the fact that you're building for the long term here, and you don't want to get too short-sighted over the fact that just because you're not out of the playoffs doesn't mean it's an easy path to get in. So you want to keep all of that in mind. As we, kind of turn the page on the week, I mentioned already the game against New Jersey on Saturday afternoon. That's the next one in line. But the Flyers really have some interesting matchups coming up. Mentioned playing the Islanders again next Friday. That kind of caps off the week and kind of sets the stage for where things are going to go over the course of the end of the month. As they play a team like that is now going to be down a player that they clearly have a beef with for what happened in Thursday's game, there's still going to possibly be some of that even without Siplikov playing in that game, that there's still a way to generate some of that, especially as you face a team that you just played again 8 days earlier. That can happen naturally. They're going to play Detroit again at home on Tuesday night. Detroit, that's a unique game because it's a totally different experience from what you had going earlier in the season. You played them twice. They've gone through a coaching change. The team is way more successful now. They're 8-2 in their last 10. That's going to be a different matchup because of how they're playing, the confidence they may be playing with, just everything that goes into that. And then you also throw in a game against the Rangers in there, who are still trying to figure things out. They've played better of late, but they're still sitting in kind of a similar playoff position and standings position because they haven't been able to figure it out with consistency. So you wonder how you stack up against a team like that. That's going to be your first time going on the road against the Rangers, playing at Madison Square Garden as opposed to playing the game that you did on home ice. The constant, the travel, the constant, different back and forth here. They're going to close out a 3-gamer against the Devils on Saturday. They play the one home game against the Rangers. They're right back on the road for 2, or against the Red Wings. They're going to be right back on the road to play the Rangers and the Islanders again. And then you're going to go back and forth again with that for a little while. You don't really see consistent home games until after the break. They do have 2 in a row as they go into the break, but when they come out of the break, they're really going to get some extended home ice time. They do play a couple of road games early on out of that break, but they have 2 on home ice right away. They go on the road for 2. They come home for 7. And that's going to be some consistent home ice play again that you can really talk about. But for the most part, the schedule is going to take them back and forth. Not too many extended road trips. A lot of the travel for right now, outside of those games in Colorado and Utah, are localized. You're going to keep taking trips to, quick one to New Jersey, come home for a game, back to play the 2 New York teams, back home for a game against New Jersey, back on the road to play New Jersey. It's not very extended road trips. And even when they take the road trip, they do play Winnipeg when they come out of that break as part of it. But their first game on the road is against Pittsburgh. That's not that long of a road trip either. So the travel is not really going to take its toll here. It's going to be more about the consistent amount of playing that they're doing in general, just the amount of games on the schedule and the amount of days. It's this stretch of January is 10 games in 17 days, for example. That's a lot of gameplay, a lot of back and forth, a lot of seeing some of the same teams also. And that's why I think the familiarity can be a good thing when you're playing this often and this frequently, because that chances are that team's going through something similar right now as they approach this break. And as you get closer to that, I think that you're going to continue to try to see what, again, you want to see what you have out of this whole thing. You want to see what players have. You want to see if there's anybody worth moving. You want to see if there's anybody that you determine is worth keeping. It's all still an evaluation process. And as much as you can evaluate certain guys and think, that guy is what he is, I know exactly what he's going to be. We had this conversation about a bunch of guys on this roster. You do still need it for some of the guys that you aren't as familiar with. If you hate to see Ryan Poehling go down with an injury, but it gives you a chance for right now, at least, to see Ula Lycksell back in the lineup. You're still trying to figure out what Matvei Michkov is. You're still trying to figure out what some of these other guys are, some of these younger players are. There's an element where you're still trying to figure out Noah Cates, Bobby Brink, and Tyson Forster. Even though they've been your most consistent line for a month and a half, you're still trying to figure them out, because that's going to be a key part of moving forward on the back end. You're still trying to figure out Igor Zamula and Jamie Drysdale and trying to figure out what are these guys. You're trying to figure out what Cam York is still. He's one of these guys that's going to need a contract at the end of the year. You're figuring out what kind of player he is, how much more you need to learn about him before you decide how big of a part of the future is he. So there's all these things that come into play, and that's what you're looking for over the next handful of games. So once again, the Flyers will be on the road to start this next week off before we're back for our next show. They're on the road in New Jersey to take on the New Jersey Devils for the first of 3 games in the next 12 days against the Devils. That game's at 12:30, and you can catch the action on 97.3 ESPN and my coverage on 97.3 ESPN.com. I'll be at Prudential Center for that game, and then the Flyers will be back on home ice next to take on the Detroit Red Wings at Wells Fargo Center on Tuesday night, back on the road to face the New York Rangers and then the New York Islanders. I'll be in New York for the game against the Rangers at Madison Square Garden as well. And then we'll go from there as the month of January kind of continues along this mid-season grind that they're kind of in. It's all kind of this grind to that break, that Four Nations break. So that's certainly an important part of where the Flyers are trying to go and see what they have as they build towards something and try to figure out more about what this team is going to be in the future. So once again, this has been an episode of Flyers Files on 97.3 ESPN.com. I'm Kevin Durso. Thanks for listening.